He must be impeached. He must be convicted. He must be removed. Someone would say, well, is she going to vote for impeachment? It's not about whether she will vote for impeachment. It's about whether her life has value and meaning, and we are going to stand up and protect all members of Congress, whether they vote for impeachment or not. What the president has said when he talked about death and hanging members of Congress is...
There's a Democrat moving forward with this resolution to impeach President Trump as well.
Yeah, and that resolution doesn't look like it has the buy-in even from his fellow Democrats. So this member of Congress has put this resolution on the floor. He's a House Democrat, Sheree Tenlander. He has put it on the floor. It will be tabled most likely in a vote tonight because Democratic leadership have signaled that they will join Republicans, and Democratic members of the House will as well, to table this motion to impeach President Trump. It doesn't have the support of House Democratic leadership, but it is a resolution that this individual member says is a long time coming. And frankly, he promises to continue to bring it up over and over and over again based on what he says are the objections he has with this administration and President Trump. But again, House Leader Hakeem Jeffries of the Democrats, as well as other House members of Democratic leadership, not in support of this effort very much likely to fail tonight on the floor.
All right. We're going to try and keep up with you. Jay O'Brien on the Hill. A lot happening. Thank you.
Okay. What just happened in Washington is absolutely insane, and I need you to understand how unprecedented this is. We are witnessing a constitutional crisis unlike anything we've seen in modern American history. President Trump just ignited a firestorm after Congress filed impeachment articles against him, and his response was to erupt in court, personally attack the federal judge handling his case, and demand that the judge be impeached and even arrested. Yeah, you heard that right. The President of the United States is trying to have a federal judge arrested because he doesn't like their rulings. This isn't normal. This isn't politics as usual. This is a direct assault on the foundations of American democracy and everything our constitutional system stands for. Chief Justice John Roberts, the head of the Supreme Court, a conservative appointed by George W. Bush, immediately issued a rare public rebuke of Trump's behavior. Roberts said that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, and that the normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. When the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has to publicly tell the president to back off from attacking judges, you know we've crossed into dangerous and unprecedented territory. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
This member of Congress has put this resolution on the floor. He's a House Democrat, Sheree Tenlander. He has put it on the floor. It will be tabled most likely in a vote tonight because Democratic leadership have signaled that they will join Republicans, and Democratic members of the House will as well, to table this motion to impeach President Trump.
Let me set the scene for you because the details are absolutely wild. Congress just filed impeachment articles against Trump, focusing on alleged abuse of power and attacks on the judiciary. This isn't about some minor procedural violation. This is about Trump systematically trying to undermine the courts and intimidate judges who rule against him. And instead of taking a step back, instead of letting his lawyers handle it through proper channels, Trump went on the offensive in the most aggressive and inappropriate way possible. He appeared in court and launched into personal attacks against the federal judge presiding over his case. He called the judge crooked. He called them biased. He demanded that House Republicans retaliate against any judges who rule against him. He's essentially trying to weaponize Congress against the judicial branch because he doesn't like court decisions that don't go his way. That's not how America works. That's not how any functioning democracy works. That's how authoritarian regimes operate. And it's terrifying to see it happening here in the United States of America. The situation has triggered emergency hearings, public outcry from legal experts across the political spectrum, and warnings that we're facing the gravest constitutional standoff in generations. Legal commentators are calling this a constitutional cage match that no democracy can afford to lose. And they're absolutely right, because what's at stake here isn't just Trump's legal troubles or his political future. What's at stake is whether the rule of law means anything in America anymore. Can a president intimidate judges into ruling in his favor by threatening their careers and their freedom? If the answer is yes, then we don't have an independent judiciary anymore. We have judges who rule based on fear of presidential retaliation rather than based on the law and the Constitution. That's how authoritarian countries work, not constitutional democracies that value freedom and justice. The timing of all this makes it even more explosive and historically significant. We now have a situation where both the president and a federal judge are simultaneously facing impeachment discussions. Trump is facing articles of impeachment from Congress for his abuse of power, and Trump is demanding that Congress impeach the judge who ruled against him simply because he didn't like the outcome. This is completely unprecedented in American history. We've never had a sitting president trying to use impeachment as a weapon against judges who don't do what he wants. The judiciary is supposed to be independent precisely so that judges can rule based on law, not based on political pressure from powerful people. Trump is trying to destroy that independence, and if he succeeds, the consequences for American democracy will be catastrophic and long-lasting. Lawmakers and judicial figures are warning against what they're calling intimidation, disguised as politics. There's been a surge in threats against judges, actual threats, not just political criticism or disagreement. Judges who rule against Trump are receiving death threats, bomb threats, harassment campaigns targeting their families, and Trump's rhetoric is pouring gasoline on that fire every single day. When the president calls a judge crooked and demands they be arrested, some of his supporters take that as permission, even encouragement, to threaten violence against those judges. Chief Justice Roberts' rebuke is particularly significant because Roberts has generally tried to stay out of political fights throughout his entire career. He sees his role as protecting the legitimacy and independence of the federal judiciary by remaining above partisan battles. For him to issue a public statement criticizing Trump means the situation has become so dangerous that silence is no longer an option. Roberts is essentially saying that Trump's behavior threatens the entire constitutional order that has governed this country for nearly 250 years, and he's absolutely right about that. The separation of powers, the idea that the executive, legislative, and judicial branches check and balance each other, only works if each branch respects the other's legitimate authority and role in our system. Trump doesn't respect the judiciary's authority at all. He thinks judges should rule in his favor automatically, and if they don't, they should be removed, arrested, or intimidated into submission. That's not a president operating within constitutional limits. That's a would-be autocrat trying to consolidate power by destroying the independent institutions that stand in his way. So we're going to break down exactly what happened, why Trump's behavior is so dangerous to our democracy, what Chief Justice Roberts' rebuke means for the future, and what happens next in this unprecedented constitutional showdown. This is the kind of moment that defines whether America remains a constitutional democracy or slides towards something much darker and more dangerous. Trust me, you're going to want to understand every single detail of this story. All right, let's dig into the details of this constitutional crisis, because understanding the specifics is crucial to grasping just how dangerous this situation really is. We need to start with the impeachment articles that Congress just filed against Trump, because that's what triggered this entire explosion of chaos. The articles focus on abuse of power and attacks on the judiciary, two categories that encompass a pattern of behavior Trump has engaged in throughout his presidency. The abuse of power charges relate to Trump using presidential authority for personal benefit rather than the public good. We're talking about leveraging government resources to attack political enemies, using executive power to obstruct investigations into his own conduct, and treating the presidency as a tool for self-protection rather than public service. The attacks on the judiciary charges are more specific and honestly more alarming. Congress is saying that Trump has systematically tried to undermine judicial independence by threatening, intimidating, and retaliating against judges who rule against him. This isn't just about mean tweets or harsh criticism of court decisions. Presidents can criticize court decisions. That's part of political discourse and is protected speech. What Trump has done goes way beyond normal criticism into territory that's genuinely dangerous for our democracy. He's called for judges to be impeached specifically because they ruled against him in cases he cared about. He's demanded that judges be arrested for doing their jobs and following the law. He's encouraged his supporters to target judges with harassment campaigns that have included death threats and bomb threats. He's created an environment where judges have to worry about their safety and their careers if they issue rulings Trump doesn't like. That's not criticism. That's intimidation, designed to corrupt the judicial process. And it strikes at the heart of how our legal system is supposed to work in a free society. When the impeachment articles were filed, instead of responding through proper legal and political channels like any normal president would, Trump absolutely erupted. He appeared in court, the actual courtroom where his case is being heard, and launched into a tirade against the federal judge. He called the judge crooked and corrupt. He said they were biased against him and couldn't be fair. He demanded that House Republicans immediately move to impeach the judge as retaliation for unfavorable rulings. He even suggested the judge should be arrested and thrown in jail for doing their job. Think about what that means for a second. the President of the United States in a federal courtroom is threatening the judge who's presiding over his case. He's not making legal arguments based on law and precedent. He's not letting his lawyers handle it professionally. He's personally attacking and threatening a federal judge in their own courtroom while that judge is trying to administer justice. That's witness intimidation, jury tampering, and obstruction of justice, all rolled into one, except it's even worse because it's the president doing it and the target is a sitting federal judge. The scene was apparently chaotic and unprecedented. Legal observers who were present described it as shocking and deeply disturbing to witness. Trump's own lawyers reportedly tried to calm him down and get him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. He kept attacking the judge, kept demanding retaliation, kept insisting that anyone who rules against him is corrupt and should be removed from office or worse. This is the behavior of someone who believes he's completely above the law and that the courts exist to serve him rather than to administer justice impartially for all Americans. Chief Justice John Roberts responded with a rare public statement that legal experts are calling historic and unprecedented in its own right. Roberts almost never comments on political matters, no matter how heated things get. He sees his role as keeping the Supreme Court above partisan fights, maintaining the legitimacy of the judiciary through neutrality and restraint, even when that's difficult. For him to break that silence and directly rebuke Trump tells you how serious this situation has become. Roberts' statement was clear and pointed in its message. He said that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. He noted that the normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. In other words, if you don't like a judge's ruling, you appeal it to a higher court and make your legal arguments there. You don't threaten to impeach or arrest the judge because you didn't get the outcome you wanted. That's not how the American legal system works, and Roberts wanted to make that absolutely clear to everyone watching. The Chief Justice's rebuke carries significant weight for several important reasons. First, it signals to lower court judges across the country that the Supreme Court has their backs during this crisis. Judges facing threats and intimidation need to know that the highest court in the land supports their independence and won't abandon them. Second, it puts Congress on notice that using impeachment against judges for their rulings will be seen as an attack on judicial independence and the constitutional order itself. Third, it creates a public record that the head of the judicial branch has formally objected to the president's behavior and found it unacceptable. That matters for historical accountability and potentially for future legal proceedings against Trump. The broader judicial community has rallied around Roberts' statement in a display of institutional solidarity. Federal judges across the country are speaking out about the threats they're facing from Trump supporters. Some have received death threats that required FBI investigation. Some have had to significantly increase their personal security. Some have been doxxed with their home addresses and family information published online by people who want to intimidate them. The climate of intimidation is real, is dangerous, and is getting worse with each passing day. Legal experts are warning that we're facing a fundamental crisis in the separation of powers that could reshape American government forever. The whole point of having three branches of government is that they check and balance each other to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. The executive enforces laws, the legislature makes laws, and the judiciary interprets laws and ensures the other branches stay within constitutional limits. But that system only works if each branch respects the other's legitimate authority and role. Trump doesn't respect judicial authority at all. He thinks the court should do what he wants, and if they don't, he'll destroy them or intimidate them into submission. He's trying to turn Congress into a weapon against judges by demanding impeachment of anyone who rules against him. He's encouraging his supporters to threaten and harass judges who don't give him what he wants. He's personally attacking judges in their own courtrooms in ways no president has ever done before. This isn't a president operating within the constitutional system. It's a president trying to tear that system down brick by brick. The fact that we now have simultaneous impeachment proceedings involving both the president and potentially federal judges is unprecedented in American history. Never have we seen anything like this situation before. Legal commentators are calling it a constitutional cage match, and they're warning that the outcome will shape American democracy for generations to come. If Trump succeeds in intimidating judges into ruling in his favor, judicial independence is effectively dead in this country. Future presidents will know they can bully the courts into submission whenever they want favorable rulings. If Congress impeaches judges simply for ruling against the president, the judiciary becomes a political puppet rather than an independent branch of government. Congressional reaction has been swift, but divided along predictable partisan lines. Democrats are pushing for aggressive action on the impeachment articles, arguing that Trump's behavior represents an existential threat to constitutional government. Some Republicans are defending Trump and his attacks on judges, claiming he's just fighting back against a biased judiciary that's out to get him. Others are staying quiet, unwilling to either defend Trump's indefensible behavior or criticize a president their base still supports passionately. The moderate Republicans who might be persuadable are in a very difficult position. They know Trump's behavior is wrong and dangerous, but they're afraid of the political consequences of saying so publicly and angering his supporters. The public reaction has been intense and divided as well. Legal experts, former judges, bar associations, and civil liberties organizations have all condemned Trump's attacks on the judiciary in the strongest possible terms. There have been protests outside courthouses defending judicial independence and the rule of law. Social media is full of people expressing alarm about what Trump is doing to American institutions and democratic norms. But there's also a significant portion of Trump's base that supports his attacks on judges, believing that the judiciary is corrupt and needs to be brought to heel by a strong president. That divide in public opinion is part of what makes this crisis so dangerous for democracy. Okay, let's break this down into clear points so everyone understands exactly what's at stake and why this constitutional showdown matters so much for the future of our country. Point number one, Trump's attacks on judges aren't normal political criticism. They're intimidation designed to influence case outcomes and corrupt the judicial process. Presidents have always criticized court decisions throughout American history. That's part of political discourse, and it's protected speech under the First Amendment. What Trump is doing is fundamentally different and much more dangerous. He's not just saying he disagrees with the ruling, he's demanding that judges be impeached and arrested for ruling against him. He's encouraging harassment campaigns against judges that have included death threats and bomb threats. He's creating an environment where judges have to fear for their careers, their safety, and even their lives if they don't rule in Trump's favor. That's not criticism. That's a systematic attempt to destroy judicial independence through fear and intimidation. When judges can't rule based on law because they're afraid of presidential retaliation, we don't have a functioning legal system anymore. We have courts that serve the president rather than the Constitution and the American people. Trump is trying to make that nightmare scenario a reality, and that's why his behavior is so dangerous and unprecedented. The threats against judges have real consequences that endanger lives and undermine justice. Federal judges across the country are reporting death threats, bomb threats, and harassment of their families since Trump ramped up his attacks. Some have had their home addresses published online by Trump supporters seeking to intimidate them. Some have needed significantly increased security details just to stay safe. This isn't abstract political conflict, it's actual danger to real people who are just trying to do their jobs and uphold the law. Point number two, Chief Justice Roberts' rebuke is historic and signals deep concern at the highest levels of the judiciary about the survival of judicial independence. Roberts almost never comments on political matters, no matter how contentious they become. He spent his entire career trying to keep the Supreme Court above partisan fights and maintain its legitimacy. For him to issue a public statement directly criticizing Trump's behavior is extraordinary and unprecedented. It tells you that Roberts believes judicial independence itself is under existential threat from this president. His statement was carefully worded, but unmistakable in its meaning and implications. Impeachment isn't for punishing judges who make decisions you don't like. That's what the appeals process is for in our legal system. By saying this publicly, Roberts is trying to establish a clear norm that Trump is violating and warn the country about what's happening. He's telling Congress that using impeachment against judges for their rulings would be seen as an attack on the constitutional order itself. And he's telling lower court judges that the Supreme Court supports their independence even when they face presidential threats and intimidation. The fact that a conservative Chief Justice appointed by a Republican president felt compelled to rebuke a Republican president tells you everything about how far Trump has crossed the line. This isn't partisan politics. This is the head of the judicial branch defending the institution he leads against assault from the executive branch. Point number three, the simultaneous impeachment proceedings involving Trump and potential proceedings against judges create unprecedented constitutional chaos that threatens our entire system of government. We've never been here before in American history. A president facing impeachment while simultaneously demanding that Congress impeach judges who rule against him. That's completely uncharted territory with no roadmap for how to proceed. It creates a conflict between branches that the Constitution's framers never anticipated when they designed our system of government. The framers assumed that presidents would respect judicial authority even when they disagreed with specific decisions. They assumed that Congress wouldn't weaponize impeachment against judges for purely political reasons. They assumed basic good faith among the branches of government operating within the constitutional system. Trump operates without that good faith, and the system is struggling to cope with his assault on democratic norms. Legal experts are genuinely uncertain how this plays out because there's no precedent to guide us. Point number four, the surge in threats against judges shows Trump's rhetoric has real-world consequences that endanger lives and corrupt justice. When Trump calls a judge crooked and demands they be arrested, some of his supporters interpret that as a call to action against that judge. They threaten the judge and their family. They show up at their home to intimidate them. They make their lives hell until they either rule the way Trump wants or resign from the bench entirely. and Trump never tells them to stop because the intimidation serves his purposes and helps him get what he wants from the courts. A judge who's worried about their family's safety might think twice before ruling against Trump on an important case. That's exactly the point of the threats and intimidation. The threats aren't a bug in Trump's strategy, they're a feature he relies on to influence judicial outcomes. Point number 5, this crisis tests whether American institutions can withstand a president who doesn't respect constitutional limits or democratic norms. The Constitution assumes that presidents will operate in good faith within the system. It provides checks and balances, but those checks only work if people respect them and honor their obligations. Trump doesn't respect them at all. He sees constitutional limits as obstacles to be overcome by any means necessary, not principles to be honored for the good of the country. So far, institutions have bent but not broken under Trump's pressure and assaults. Courts have continued to rule against him when the law requires it. Congress has continued to exercise oversight despite Trump's obstruction. The press has continued to report despite Trump's attacks on journalists. But each assault weakens those institutions a little more. Each threat makes judges a little more cautious about ruling against Trump. Each attack on oversight makes Congress a little less effective at holding the executive branch accountable. The question is whether institutions can hold until this crisis passes, or whether they'll be so damaged that they can't recover and function properly again. Point number 6, the outcome of this constitutional cage match will shape American democracy for decades or even generations to come. If Trump succeeds in intimidating the judiciary into submission, future presidents will know they can do the same thing whenever they want favorable rulings. The precedent will be set that courts serve the executive rather than checking his power. If Congress impeaches judges for ruling against the president, judicial independence becomes meaningless forever. Judges will rule based on political calculation and fear rather than law and constitutional principles. If the public accepts Trump's attacks on the courts as normal political behavior, the expectation of judicial independence erodes and may never return to American life. On the other hand, if institutions hold firm, if judges keep ruling based on law despite threats, if Congress rejects using impeachment as a weapon against judges, if the public demands respect for constitutional norms, then this crisis becomes a stress test that American democracy survives and emerges stronger from. The impeachment process now moving through Congress is absolutely crucial to the outcome. If the articles of impeachment lead to real accountability for Trump's behavior, it sends a message that attacks on judicial independence have serious consequences. If the process fails or is blocked by partisan loyalty to Trump, it sends the opposite message that presidents can assault the courts without any penalty whatsoever. What happens in the coming weeks and months will be studied by historians for centuries to come. This is one of those moments where the choices made now echo through time and shape the future of the nation. We're deciding what kind of country we want to be, one where the rule of law constrains even the most powerful, or one where power trumps law and the Constitution becomes meaningless. So where does this leave us right now? We have a president who's openly attacking judicial independence and threatening judges who rule against him in unprecedented ways. We have a chief justice who's issued a rare public rebuke, signaling deep concern at the highest levels of the judiciary. We have Congress moving forward with impeachment articles focused on abuse of power and attacks on the courts. We have judges across the country facing unprecedented threats and intimidation from the president's supporters. And we have a country that's deeply divided over whether Trump's behavior is acceptable or represents a fundamental threat to our democracy. The constitutional cage match is underway, and the stakes are nothing less than the survival of American democracy as we know it. Can our institutions withstand a president who doesn't respect their authority or the constitutional limits on his power? Can judges maintain their independence in the face of threats, intimidation, and harassment? Can Congress hold the president accountable for attacking co-equal branches of government? These questions will be answered in the coming months, and the outcome is genuinely uncertain because we've never been here before in American history. But one thing is absolutely clear: this is a defining moment for American constitutional government and the rule of law. What happens now will shape the country for decades to come and determine whether the framers' vision of democracy survives. So pay attention, because this is history being made in real time. Are you kidding me? This is the most consequential constitutional crisis of our lifetime, and it's far from over.